I have news that may be shocking to many of you. You may be experiencing inflation, high prices on goods, fuel. Well, if you were wondering why that is, look no further than the Ukraine-Russia conflict. That's right. Several months ago, when you noticed that food was costing you more money. A year ago, when there were food shortages. It was actually because there's a rift in the time-space continuum. And so you see what happens is Russia invades Ukraine, triggering this time ripple effect, which sends waves of inflation back in time. All right. Enough of the bit. CBS News ripped for blaming inflation, other economic issues on Ukraine crisis. News scapegoat has dropped. Inflation already hit a 40-year high earlier this month when the consumer price index rose 7.5%. And yes, inflation has consistently been hitting decade highs over the past several months. And we can blame Biden for some of it. I think it's absurd to blame Biden for literally all of it. And there is some interesting nuance here because, well, Fox News, you want to play a game? Let's play a game. I do think that CBS, they played their hand a little too hard on this one, trying to carry water for Joe Biden. However, they're not completely wrong. You see, what's happening is CBS says, are you experiencing high gas prices? Well, look at what's going on in Ukraine. And you're like, wait a minute, that just started. All right. There's some nuance there, to be sure. Biden is at fault for a lot of the economic problems we're facing. But now everyone's trying to act like CBS outright blamed all of the inflation on what's happening in Ukraine. No, they just played their hand a little bit too hard because it does seem, well, maybe I'll put it this way. They jumped the gun. They jumped the gun because they found a scapegoat. But the reality is even Fox News themselves have stated this. On Fox News' The Five, inflation and gas prices will get much worse if Russia invades Ukraine. You see, here's the key difference, though. For those of you, my good friends, who don't like Fox News, the liberal viewer who hate watches these videos, or actually the legitimate liberal viewer who likes my videos, I respect that greatly. Thank you very much. You see, Fox News said on February 21st, it will get worse. CBS tweets, the U.S. economy has been hit with increased gas prices, inflation, and supply chain issues due to the Ukraine crisis. Yo, it literally just happened. You see, this is the dirty game they play. While Fox News is not wrong to say things will get worse, they're already bad. CBS is trying to play this game where they're like, it's bad because of the Ukraine crisis. They were waiting for this moment to carry water for Joe Biden. They use a morsel of truth and they stretch it beyond recognition. I've criticized Alex Jones for exactly the same. And they wonder why it is I'm critical of the establishment media apparatus and their smears against people like Alex Jones. Look, Alex, in my opinion, often will take a story that's legitimate and then really just kind of reach with what the implications are. Not always. Alex Jones has been right on many occasions, so much so that you've got people like Joe Rogan saying like, hey, he was right about this one. And it's true. But the truth be told, many outlets are right about a lot of things. Now, look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that the corporate press, well, we're in a strange world. I'll say it mildly, because I do think Alex Jones gets a lot wrong. He really, really does. When you make 100 random predictions, you end up getting a bunch of them right. But the reality is Alex has been right about a lot of things, legitimately right with legitimate research. They don't like to hear that. When I said in the past that Alex Jones, during it was a 2016 cycle, I said InfoWars is trying to be like a right-wing Huffington Post. They got mad. And they were like, but InfoWars is conspiracy nonsense. And I'm like, have you read their articles? It'll be like Trump does X. It's the inversion of what the Huffington Post was doing. But anyway, I digress. This is the game they play. If it wasn't for independent media, you genuinely believe your strife, your struggles were caused by Russia. They do things like this because there's a morsel of truth here. Experts can say it. People like me will be forced to admit there is a morsel of truth here. But then they can point the finger at Russia and say, this, my friends, is why you want war. Why should I care about the the Donbass region of Ukraine when our southern border is in shambles? Now, look, I think we should care about Ukraine. I know. Ignoring it would be a problem. And we can't just, I worry that if Putin is allowed to keep doing what he's doing, then we effectively have like the World War II appeasement of Hitler, and Putin will keep pressing. He's not going to stop where he's at. Oh, I just want to support the independent regions. Sure, it was Crimea first. Now it's Donbass. What's next? I have no reason to believe Putin's going to stop, but I don't know for sure. I really don't. And I can say this: we care about it. I don't see a reason for the U.S. to be intervening in any hard capacity. It's not our border. It's not our neighbor. We have a problem with our neighbor, with Mexico. We have a problem with our border. Yet we're concerned about Russia's border. It's pathetic. Let's read the news. Fox News reports. They say CBS News is being ripped by critics for blaming increased gas prices, inflation, and supply chain issues on Russia and the crisis in Ukraine, rather than the Biden administration's handling of the economy. The U.S. economy has been hit with increased gas prices, inflation, and supply chain issues due to the Ukraine crisis, the Liberal Network wrote in a Tuesday tweet, linking to an article that described what could happen as a result of Russian action in Ukraine rather than economic challenges already impacting Americans. Despite the ongoing struggles hitting wallets across the country, the piece also claimed that Americans were able to weather spikes in the price of goods because of government-provided enhanced unemployment benefits during the height of the coronavirus pandemic, stimulus payments, and tax credits. I saw this video. Let me slow down and preface this with, if you follow me on Twitter, you can look at who I follow, and you'll notice that I follow left-wing activists, journalists, right-wing activists, right-wing journalists, left-wing journalists, whatever. I was watching a video from a Democratic super PAC group called Midas Touch. It's this woman who is called Politics Girl, and I'm not a big fan, but I do enjoy seeing the perspective and hearing the arguments that the establishment activists put out. And her position was that gas prices are going up because during the pandemic, with demand for gas going down, oil producers, they slowed drilling, they restricted production. OPEC as well was doing a similar strategy. And now that things are reopening, they're artificially keeping supply low to force, so there's constraints on demand, which make the prices go up, and then they can recuperate their losses from the pandemic. You know, the funny thing is, she's not wrong. I watch these videos and I'm like, man, I just wish she had the full picture on this. That's not the only reason gas prices are high. It is a contributing factor. I've read many articles talking about demand shocking the system. The problem is, at the same time as this is going on, Joe Biden is restricting production on public lands for fracking. He has rescinded the permitting for Keystone Pipeline, and has otherwise, as the president and leader of this country, whether you like it or not, expressed disdain for energy production. The result is this: when it comes to banning of fracking, when it comes to Keystone, you are going to see a shock from speculators. Speculators will then start buying up as much as they can, driving the demand. The demand is not just magically reappearing because the pandemic is over. So it is true that these companies are trying to make more money, but demand is spiking because of speculation. Why? Well, for a variety of reasons. One, what these oil companies are doing, what Joe Biden is doing. Under Donald Trump, we were energy independent. Gas, man, there's a photo that goes viral that Trump supporters love to share it around. $1.77 for gas. Where I'm at, an hour outside of DC, we had gas at $1.80. Amazing. And if you're a working class person, if you run a small business, if you're working paycheck to paycheck, that matters, because now it's twice the price. And that's going to ripple across everything. So I can respect there's some element of truth to what these greedy corporations, they call it, or OPEC, are doing. But man, if only we were striving for energy independence, could we then maybe resist those price increases? Well, here we go. While Joe Biden shuts down production in the United States, we end up with sanctions being lifted on Nord Stream 2. Now, I know the sanctions are probably coming back. Germany is halting production because of what Russia is doing in Ukraine. All of this will lead to an escalation of prices, but stop playing these games, man. Look, the reality is Mainstream corporate press is going to carry water for the Democratic establishment. These political activists are going to do the same thing, and they're going to convince people to believe half-truths or just half of the story. Fox News continues. They say, critics took to social media to rip CBS News, with some accusing it of undertaking an ingenious effort to cover up the Biden administration's economic failures. Dinesh D'Souza says, check out this ingenious effort to cover up the failures of the Biden administration. It's all due to what Putin is doing in Ukraine. I love this. Libby Emmons of the Post Millennial tweeted, I think it was Libby. She said, maybe it wasn't, but I think she said that, I'm sorry, it was Lauren Chen. Lauren Chen said, that time I didn't turn my homework in the 8th grade was due to the conflict, to the crisis in Ukraine. And then Cassandra Fairbanks made a similar joke. I tweeted, I accidentally ate a whole pizza due to the conflict in Ukraine. That's the joke. Yo, it just started. Matt Kibbe says this is hysterical. I love it, man. Todd Starnes, this is simply not true. Not Your Huckleberry says they really think Americans are stupid. Elise Stefanik, no, don't let them get away with it. Due to Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi's failed far-left policies, thanks. The new scapegoat has just dropped. Lauren Chen says enemy of the people with a clown emoji. Look, I want to slow down a little bit, everybody. To everybody who is just coming out and mocking CBS, I really think you need some substance behind these tweets. When Fox News comes out and says inflation and gas prices will get worse if Russia invades, and then you go to the actual CBS article and they outright say, if Russia makes a run on Ukraine, we could see oil prices over $100 a barrel next week, said Patrick DeHaan, head of petroleum analysis at Gas Buddy, adding that average gas prices across the U.S. are likely to hit $4 a gallon in the weeks or months to come. That $4 is something we haven't seen in so long. It would cause shockwaves across America. Half-truths. You've got to counter the half-truths with the other morsel of truth missing from the narrative. Just coming out and insulting the media, I'm not trying to drag anybody, but I don't think it's enough. You got to point out that Joe Biden's policies had direct impacts on the economy. To put it simply, COVID was a real problem. Donald Trump suffered as much as a leader, as much as Joe Biden did because of COVID. What I'm saying here is, when COVID has an impact on people's ability to work, it doesn't matter who the leader is. And you've got to be honest about this. Don't be like CBS. Joe Biden is not 100% the cause. Now, I get it. I know conservatives know that. I know Trump supporters know that. I know the anti-establishment, anti-Democrat types know all that. I'm just saying, put it in your messaging. Don't just come out and be like, the media lies. You know what I mean? I can respect it, but I think we need to point out the very simple chain of events. Keystone Pipeline was going to be built. There was, I believe the projections were within several years, we would see, was it crude from the tar sands up in Canada coming down and transporting this energy source to the U.S. And when it was shut down, speculators looking at the growth prospects for the United States said, we will not be able to meet demand unless we have fracking and oil transport. Due to the Biden administration's shuttering of this, it's not just about the one pipeline. It's that you can expect other pipelines and other infrastructure not to be approved or to be jammed up. You could expect politics to play a role in why energy isn't being transported properly or produced. Fracking, for instance. Not saying I'm a big fan of fracking, but I get why we do it. Speculators then said, if I buy oil now, the price will skyrocket and I can sell it. You got a problem? Blame the speculators. I'm not a fan of speculators. Buying stuff and extracting value from the system at a time of crisis, I'm no fan of. But they saw what Biden was doing and they took advantage. That's not the only reason, okay? The other issue is that demand generally just spikes for a variety of reasons when Joe Biden starts enacting certain policies. It's one issue, but it does play a major role because when that happens and speculators come in, and you got to understand these are institutional speculators, they're big companies, they're oil producers themselves, it's going to negatively impact people. You can argue that we blame the speculators and the oil companies and not Joe Biden. And I think it's a fair point. But why did Joe Biden shut down Keystone? No, for real, like why? Now, the argument from the left is, oh, but it's dangerous and it leaks and gets oil everywhere. I'm like, that's true. And freight leaks as well. When you're transporting via freight, you get tons of catastrophe the same. They just don't pay attention to that stuff. They come out with stories like this. You know, the other big issue here, I love it. Rob Eno says this all magically happened in 24 hours. The other big issue here is they want you angry with Russia. Don't fall for it. There are real reasons to be upset with Russia for what Russia is doing. And there's real reasons to be upset with the Biden administration and with Democrats over what they're doing with the southern border. Last night, we had Steve Renee on from Fortitude Ranch. They're a survival camp and community. He made an excellent point. He said it's two sides of the coin. You know, you don't have to ignore what's happening in Ukraine just because something's happening in the United States. And you need to understand the southern border in the U.S. being porous. That is the policy. And so it's funny. He made a great point. A lot of people are pointing out the southern border is in crisis, but we're focusing on Ukraine's border. And his response is, yeah, but the southern border being in crisis is on purpose. And what's happening in Ukraine is not. Or you can argue is mostly not. I don't trust the Biden administration. I think they very much want this conflict. I think that under Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin wasn't advancing the way he is. Look, they took Crimea in 2014. Vladimir Putin could have gone into the Donbass region then when these regions declared independence. He didn't do it. In fact, after the Donbass eastern region in Ukraine declared independence, even Russia said we don't recognize it. But now under Joe Biden, all of a sudden, Putin says, I do recognize it. Makes no sense, does it? Oh, it actually does. Under Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin was worried. He was scared of the man. Now, I'm not saying Vladimir Putin feared walking up to Trump, like as if Trump was going to hit him. Come on. Vladimir Putin's got military training. Some people are like, he was just a lawyer in the KGB. He wasn't a secret agent. I'm not saying he was a secret agent, but the dude certainly knows how to do jujitsu at the very least. He's not worried. He's not scared of Trump as a human being. He's scared of Trump as a president because he knows that during the Trump administration, if he made one move on eastern Ukraine, Trump would start mashing the buttons. You don't even know what Trump would be doing. You ever try playing Texas Hold'em against people who don't know how to play? You don't even know what they're doing. It's funny. It really, really is. You know, so we played poker a couple weekends ago, and some of the people didn't know how to play or what a flush was. And so they didn't know the value of hands. And so they bet erratically. And it's hard to read them because you're effectively playing the deck at that point. Now, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on Hold'em or anything like that. The point is, if you know you're playing against someone who knows strategy and knows the value of cards, and they're trying to, play correctly, you can better predict their moves. But if someone's just acting randomly and sporadically, it's guesswork. And at that point, you're only playing based on the strength of your own hand. For Vladimir Putin, he knew the strength of his own hand was not enough to overcome Trump losing it. So what happens? Nothing. There were some instances of conflict in Crimea, the Black Sea, with Ukraine under Trump, but for the most part, Putin didn't do anything. Now that Biden's in, Putin says, I know what they're willing to accept, and I know what I can get away with. Joe Biden comes out, and he says, if there's a minor incursion, we'll see what happens. And Putin's like, I know. I can move some troops into the eastern region, and Biden won't do anything about it. He's too scared. What would Trump have done? Trump would be like, I don't like what he's doing. I'm pressing these 3 buttons. And they're like, Trump, Mr. President, those fire cruise missiles. I don't know, whatever. And he's mashing buttons. I know, I'm kidding. Donald Trump would just mash the buttons, but he'd be like, I want swift action in Ukraine. I will not tolerate this. I will not be the president to allow this to happen. And they're going to be like, sir, that will result in mass damage. He's like, I will not be the president. Trump would have been like, don't you dare. And Putin knew that Trump was a madman. That's it. I'm not saying Trump was the best at this or anything like that. I'm saying he was unpredictable and he was aggressive, and Putin knew it. Under Donald Trump, gas prices were dropping. Unemployment in the Black and Latino communities were lower than they've been in decades or generations. The economy was, as Jim Cramer put it, the best numbers of our lives. How did that happen under Donald Trump? That your life improved? And you know what? Well, obviously we know. I mean, Donald Trump's policies worked for whatever they were. They were working. And then you get Joe Biden. And boy, within a year, the worst inflation we've seen. And what do they say? Don't blame Joe Biden. It's COVID. Don't blame Joe Biden. It's Russia. Spare me. Okay? Come 2022, I hope the people, the election this year, I should say, come November, I hope people realize I hope people understand what Democrat policy has gotten you. Sure, maybe the social justice warriors are happy, but how's your paycheck? You, the working class American. How's gas prices? How's food costs? How's the food shortage? How's your job going? I think Joe Biden's been an absolute disaster, and it's only been 1 year. Certainly, this man cannot run for re-election, so I don't know what they're going to do. But I'll tell you this, Democrats are going to need to have a primary to figure out who will be running in 2024, because it ain't going to be Joe Biden. And if it is, wow. Look, I'll say I didn't think Biden could have won in the first place, but I underestimated people's hatred of Trump. That's a reality. I can't imagine people would vote for Joe Biden again after as bad as everything's been. But who knows, man? You know, we're looking at what, 2.5, 3 years almost. That's an eternity in politics. For all we know, Joe Biden gets some cyborg surgery and then flies in on a jetpack with rocket boots or something. I don't know. Obviously, that won't happen. I'm kidding. But, maybe something changes. Maybe he really turns things around. He's got a couple of years to do it. All that really matters is the last few months. But if it gets too bad, if this gets really, really bad, there's no amount of time that would heal this wound. If you experience a loss of career, a loss of life, a loss of liberties, you're going to remember it. Now, if things are relatively stable going into 2024, the last few months are all that matters. How are things going? Keep them going. Okay. Change them. Okay. I think people are not going to forget what this was all about. I think this war could escalate, and I think we're going to see a major change in November. But we'll see. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.